So a lot of Business Edition, couple Designer Edition. Business Edition is cool. There's a lot of things that are helpful in it. You know, and I'm not going to say it's like, I don't know, revolutionary, will change your life. However, there are things that do help speed up, you know, your design process, your production process, and it's convenient to say the least. So what I'll go over today are just different things that are helpful about it, fun about it, things that will help production. A lot of these things are more helpful when you're actually like making the object, so cutting, that sort of thing. So it won't be as, you know, much on my screen, but I'll try to explain it to you as best as I can. So I don't know why I just yawned, I'm sorry. So for those of you who are running Business Edition, how would you rate your skill level in it? On a scale of 1 to 5, what do you think? Like, how would you say you use it? And so and I know some people are saying, talking about software updates, so 3s, 2s, 2.5. Cool. So as far as the update goes, the current version of Silhouette Studio is version 4.1. They came out with a software update a couple weeks ago, like 4.1 and some numbers. I'm not super sure which one it is. I personally have not updated to that yet because I think the update is still causing a little bit of issues, so I'm going to wait for a bug fix on that. It's kind of strange because I do run advanced copies on my laptop, and that version gave me no issues before, but now it's giving people problems, so I'm just going to wait a little bit on that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is today's webinar is probably going to be closer to like 30-45 minutes, just kind of like browsing different items, different things that'll make Business Edition useful. How many of you, before I get started, how many of you are pretty new to webinars, like, you know, less than 5, or how many webinars have you been to? Like, let me know how many you've been to. So lots. First with TRW, well, welcome. Second with me, a lot. So a few first ones. So this is awesome. Laura goes, this is Laura. Too many to count. Awesome. So those of you who have been to my webinars know what I'm about to say. Those of you who are new, welcome. My name is Lisa. I'm a creative project instructor here for the Rhinestone World. So I specialize in silhouette. I specialize in smaller craft projects or things that can kind of help build up your business, different things that you can do. The way that I do webinars is I really love seeing interaction from you guys. It makes me feel a little bit less than I'm sitting in a room by myself talking to a computer. So any and all comments are definitely welcome. And I always like, as you guys who do come to my webinars frequently know, I love answering questions as they're relevant. So as I'm going, if you have a question, type it into the question bar. I will answer it if I can. If it is something that maybe I'm going to answer later on, I will get to that. Also, every now and then, when I do webinars, I think I breathe too deeply or something, and then I get into yawning fits. Just so you know, I'm not bored with you. I have been getting enough sleep. I just think I don't know. I get this thing where I there it goes. Maybe I breathe too deeply or I get too excited, and I think I get in my head because then I feel too much pressure to not yawn, and so I start yawning. So just a heads up, sometimes I yawn. I'm not bored. It's just a weird thing when I present sometimes. All right, so let me go ahead and get started. So right here, you're going to see that my computer, I am running Business Edition. So when you're running Silhouette Studio and you're trying to figure out, hey, which version am I running, you can go right here, and up in your toolbar, it'll tell you. So Silhouette Studio Business Edition. So that's what I'm running. Now, some of the things, so one thing to note about Business Edition and Silhouette Studio upgrades in general is that when you get Business Edition, you will also, that includes every feature of the versions below as well. So Designer Edition allows you to import SVG files. more advanced designing features, knife tools, and then the rhinestone feature is a big deal with it. Designer Edition Plus, which is in between them, allows you to bring in embroidery files, those sorts of things. And so Business Edition will give you all those features below, and then it will have the additional features that I'm going to show you in today's webinar. One of the biggest reasons why I enjoy Business Edition, and I think it's worth it for you guys, especially if you are current customers with us, is that it allows you to bring in multiple file types. That's helpful because if you are working with a designer or you're working with CorelDRAW, a different file, you don't have to save a file as an SVG to bring it into Silhouette Studio. Am I not showing my screen? Can you see my screen? Yeah, you can see it, right? You can see my screen, right? Okay, cool. So if you only see me and you don't see my screen, you may need to just move the slider on your webinar to show that. So I haven't shown anything in there because I'm explaining file types. Okay, so you don't have to, as far as the files, you don't have to save it as SVG. There is more freedom in the files that you bring in. Two, as far as files go and the benefit, Business Edition allows you to export out SVG files now. So one of the biggest issues that I had with Silhouette for a really long time is they make their software very design based. It is a design software as opposed to a click and drag type of what you see is what you get thing. So my problem is I would make these really cool designs in there, and best case scenarios, you use your Silhouette so much and business picks up that you need to get a bigger software, a bigger cutter. Well, if I were to move up to my GraphTech cutter, those files I would have had to recreate in CorelDRAW or use like some, not super secure website to convert it over because it's stuck in Silhouette Studio as a .studio file. Now in Business Edition, which is awesome, you can save it as a SVG file. So let me go over and basically, let's say we have a design in here. You would just go to File, Save As, and you save it to your hard drive. And so now you can see, okay, here's, all the stuff here, blah, blah, title, but we can click this little button here and we can save it as an SVG. So then we can choose that and save it and we're all set. Now that is huge. It's a big benefit. I love doing that. To be totally honest, a lot of times I still design in Silhouette Studio because I like certain things in it better than Corel and the Wizard. And now I save it as an SVG and then I bring it into the Wizard to kind of do a couple last minute things. So I think it's awesome, and it's super fun. Now, as far as different features in it, a lot of the features in Business Edition are geared towards kind of speeding up your production. So some of the things I'm going to talk about are you can run multiple cutters, you can do weed lines, you can do a whole bunch of different things like that. And hold on 1 second. There's something going on in the hallway. I'll be right back. 1 second. Sorry. Okay, so like I was saying, you can run multiple cutters on here, and then it also has our media layout view, which is going to be helpful with doing larger cuts. So things that are great about Silhouette Studio is that you can set up a cut that's larger than your cutting mat, and it'll break up your cuts for you. So I'm going to start with that. Now, if you guys have any questions as I go, again, please feel free to ask them. You guys still there after I had to run out the room? Okay. So let's go over it, and I'm just going to kind of just draw a shape in here. So let me go to my library, actually, see what I got going on in here. This is just my Silhouette Studio library, and then let's see what's on my cloud one. Okay, so let's do this TRW Brewing design that I have here. Let me take off my hat because my head's all sweaty. Okay, so we have our TRW Brewing, and let's take this weed box out of here. So let's say we're doing a really big wall decal. Okay, this is going to be huge. We're going to do it, 4 feet by 4 feet, all right? So if we go right here, let's select our item, and I'm going to just lock our ratio and resize it. So 4 feet, I basically would do 36 plus 12, so 48 inches wide. So let's do 48. Go ahead and do that. So we have a really big design going on right now, okay? You see that? So This is bigger than what we would even cut on our GraphTech, okay? So this is big, so we're going to have to break up our cuts. So let's go over and we are going to open up our media layout view. So when you're running Business Edition, you are going to have additional features. Depending on how big your screen is, some of your buttons may not show up on your right toolbar. So this is good no matter what version you use. So on my screen, I have a really big screen to do webinars, but I also make my buttons really big so you guys can see it. So I have a trade-off going on right now. So I'm going to click this little arrow, and right here we have our media layout setup panel. So essentially what this is we have our panel here, and so when we do our media layout setup, it's almost taking like a bigger and more improved version of the cut panel that we see when we set up the cut, but we can see it with our design on one side and our cuts on the other side. So let's go ahead and show media layout split screen. Now, I'm going to jump to a feature in there, and then I'm going to come back to these panels because tiling that I'm talking about now is actually this last option here. So we can see we have our design. It's 4 feet wide. And then right here we have our media size. So let's say we're cutting on pieces of FDC, which is our sign vinyl. I'm going to turn off my cutting mat because I'm going to cut multiple feet at a time. So it's 4 feet wide, but I can cut 4 feet long if I want. So let's say I want to do, you know, I have a really long piece of vinyl. It's 50 inches of vinyl. Okay. So you can see my design all set up in here. All right. So this is our media layout. So this is what we're telling them. Hey, this is how big my piece of vinyl is going to be. And this is what helps set up my tiles for it. Okay. So hopefully you guys are getting what I'm saying so far. Does that make sense as far as my media layout? So this, even though tiling is breaking up the cuts, this is still important because it basically will tell the software, break up my cuts, and this is the amount of space that you have to do this, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get going. Now, let me jump over to our tiling feature, okay? So right now, nothing's happening. You can see on the right side of my screen, if I were to cut this right now, it's gonna cut like a little tiny section of my design. So let's go over here, turn on tiling, and so check this out. So over here, you're gonna see on the left side of your screen, I'm gonna kind of extend this out so you can see it a little bit more too. On the left side of your screen, you're gonna see the tiles going on, okay? So technically my design is higher, it's actually 54 inches high. So I'm gonna go over and change my design to be 48 inches tall and then whatever wide. So 48 inches tall and 42 inches wide. So at this point, because we're cutting on a 50-inch piece of vinyl, you need that extra space to account for your rollers. So this is going to do multiple cuts here. So if I were to do something like this, I'm going to go over and cut on a bigger piece of vinyl. So let's say we'll do 55 inches. And so we have our bigger piece of vinyl going on right here. So let's go right here and go back to tiling. So I'm going to turn it off so you can see that. So you have our 48-inch tall design, 42 inches wide. Let's go ahead and turn on tiling. So check this out. We have this tiny little section of the G that comes out. So I can go ahead and we can change the size of the grid, okay? So you see how this says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Do you guys see that? So let's say we had a part of our design that it was kind of tricky and we would rather have more on one piece and less on the other. So let's say we wanted, you know, this tier W, we wanted more space over here. Then we can kind of like do less right here and move that around. So you can see our design here, but it makes this section here bigger, okay? So let's go ahead and bring that back. And we want all of this to go onto our cutting mat. You see that? So you can adjust the panels, but you have to be careful to make sure it's not going over the edge of your material over on this side on the right. Does that make sense, you guys? Cool. Awesome. So let me bring this back to make sure this all would fit in our material. So here's our design. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, we don't need this 5th panel. So here are our tiling panels here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we can go over here, position and size. We can go ahead and I always do user defined, which is basically this is how big my design is. This is a way to adjust the size that I did over here on the left. Now, configure a regular grid. Custom means I moved it. Automatic, they make one for me. So this is the grid that they cut it with. And then regular grid, they just do 1, 2. They basically break it up into 2 sections, and then we would do columns here. So we can do, you know, multiple columns right there. But one thing to look out for is it's not actually considering our material size. It's literally just like separating it. It doesn't matter. So over here, I would just do automatic. This sets up my cuts for me. I can check right here, and we can set that down like that. Now overlap, I always do a little bit of an overlap when I do tiling. Basically, to help line it up, there's a little bit of overlap to make it easier. So I always do something pretty small, 0.02. It's like a magic trap if you guys use the wizard. And so there are my cuts for that. And then show dimensions, I always do that. And then tiling, we have our tiles right here. So let's say we are gonna go to cut this. So let me go over and pretend like we're cutting. So let's go to our send panel. I'm gonna turn on my Cameo so it can show you that. Now here are my big cuts. I would choose my setting, I would load it in, and I would do send, okay? So this will send my first thing, and actually what I'll do is I'm gonna take my blade out so it'll act like it's cutting, and you can see what happens on there. So let me lean over, take my blade out of my cutter. Okay, so let's say we have this set in here. Let me load my material. So you'll see my Cameo is ready. Let's go ahead and send. So it's feeding in my material. Can you guys hear my Cameo running? There we go. So I'm gonna kind of shout to my mic so you can hear me better. Can you guys still hear me okay though? Okay, so this is cutting. Now if we look, you can see we have cut lines down here, and it's cutting tile number 1 of 10. So what it's doing is that because it made us a grid, it's still in its mind, thinks that there's 10 tiles, but in reality we only have 4, okay? So this is something that in the previous screen where it says cut tiles, you would do 1 through 4. Now I'm gonna let this cut. So this right here is the total time it's gonna take to cut. So right here, once it cuts, it's gonna keep going, and then it's gonna give me a pause. So we're still going. It might take a few minutes because this is 4 feet, okay? So let me go back to design and show you some stuff. Because the lid makes it so much more quieter. But right here, see how it says all tiles or selected tiles only? I'm sorry, it just got so loud. Right here, we would do, if we did it again, we would do selected tiles only. And I would just do 1 through 4. So let's do 1 through 10. Instead of that, we'll do 1 through 4. Hit enter. So now all of these will cut. So when we go to do our next one, it'll only have those 4 tiles, okay? I know it's mad at me. It's also pretty close to my mic, so I'm sorry if it's loud. If it's too loud and too much of a distraction, please tell me, okay? But I thought it would be nice for you guys to see how the tiles look during this section here. So, do you guys have any questions so far on, okay, here we go. So paused, okay? So this is the first tile. So let's go ahead and unload. Does this help seeing this part here? I don't typically do this in my business edition webinars. Does that help? Do you like that? It's feeding out 4 feet. Okay, cool. I'm glad it helps. Do you hear this? Okay, so we've unloaded our material, all right? So we're paused. I've unloaded tile 1, okay? So let's put our next piece in. Let's load it. All right, so we have load new media. So we've done that. And so see right here, resume cutting. Check this out. Cut lines tool 2, check right here, tile number 2. Do you guys see where my mouse is? Get out of here, Bluetooth. can't turn that off. So does that make sense? So what if you had a continuous roll? Well, if you had a continuous roll, with something like that, you would just kind of, let me think of the best way of that. For a continuous roll, what I would do is after my first tile, I would actually cut that piece off and start a new one, but keep it on the roll. Because in this case, this bigger one, the whole reason why we're tiling is because we can't do the whole design in one continuous cut. Now, if you want to do a really long cut that's like 10 feet long, which by the way, I'm going to film a video today where I do an 8.5 foot decal, that you actually don't need tiling for, because that design, if it's within 12 inches wide or tall or whatever, but 10 feet long, that's still one cut. We would use tiling if we had a design that was larger than a foot, both horizontally and vertically, and that's why we need to break it up. So I'm just gonna let this tile go and just show you, one last part with it, and then we'll go. So let's say I'm just gonna let this cut finish. Do you guys have any questions on tiling? Does everything make sense with that? I think this is one of the biggest features that is helpful in Silhouette Studio, so I wanted to make sure I spent a decent amount of time on that. I know, it did sound sick. Everyone makes fun of my little Cameo machine. So for a decal that long, how do you keep the material lined up? So there are two main schools of thoughts with the materials. Thanks guys. I'm glad you think my silhouette sounds so bad. I run it into the ground though. Okay, so long materials. So if you are cutting longer than the mat and you are cutting a really, really long piece of vinyl, so the first thing you can do is you can use a roll feeder. A roll feeder is going to make sure it feeds in straight, and it's going to make it super easy. I personally do not use a roll feeder because I get all my vinyl from here, and I keep them on really big rolls that don't fit into a roll feeder, and honestly, I don't like using them. Now really, okay, so we're done with that cut. Let me just go ahead and cancel that. And then, okay, so we're all set with like that. Now, what I do, and check out the video that I'm going to put up probably next week or the week after. If you have a long piece of vinyl, the biggest issue with cutting a long piece of vinyl is making sure that it loads in straight. So what I do is I take a lot of time before I even cut it. I put my vinyl in and I load it in, and I basically will use the arrows on my machine, so these arrows right here or on my touch screen, and I just feed the whole piece of vinyl through and back. Now if I'm feeding it and I see my vinyl start to shift, then I stop it, unload it, load it back in, look at the lines to guide, and I basically do that until I can feed almost all the vinyl all the way through perfectly straight, and then I will do my cut. So yeah, it can take a little bit longer to start, but hey, you're not wasting material. So in this case, the machine thinks you're using multiple 12 by 12 sheets of vinyl. Yes and no. In this case, the machine thinks that I am using 12 by 55 inch pieces of vinyl. So you can see this preview over here, we have a lot of big long pieces. So right here, when we are in a business edition and we are using media layout setup, one of the benefits of using media layout setup is that we don't have to do a whole lot of adjusting to our design or our workspace. We can kind of keep our design on its own and adjust the cut things on the other side. So let me turn off tiling and let me go over here and take my design and keep it within this 12-inch space. So my design right now is 7 by 8 is essentially what it is right now. But let's say I want to do a really big job, okay? So right here, this is my design, and this right here is what we're cutting it on. So let's say I have my design and I'm going to cut it on 12 by 24 inch vinyl. We have this, we have our cutting, we're not doing cutting mat, we're doing all of that right here, okay? So that's our media size, all right? So then we can go over and do our tiling, turn on our tiling, and then we can also see right here, this is our workspace here. So we would go over and I would just go ahead and use my design and bring up my design and do my tiling over here, okay? So this is our media size. So basically I can keep my design whatever size, I want it to be really big, but I can choose my media over here, okay? So let me go over and I'm going to turn off tiling and show you a couple more things in the media layout setup, okay? So that's turned off. Okay, so I did my media, which is this first page here, and let me review it real quick for you. This is basically your page panel wrapped up over here. So we have our media 12-inch by 24-inch, and then we have our cut border. You would just basically, I always do a little bit of a cut border. I do a 0.125 cut border just to keep it safe. So you can see my design is moving on the right side. I think it's a good practice to have one. You don't have to if you don't want to. So we have this set over here. Now let's go over here and we have copy, all right? So we have one design here that is 5 inches wide, 6 inches tall, okay? And we want to do a whole bunch of it, but I don't want to have to manually make copies of my design over and over again. That's super annoying. So what we can do is we can make multiple rows. So let's say I want 5 rows of this, hit enter. And you can see that it's doing 5 rows, but it recognizes that my design is a little bit too big to do 5 on one piece. So it basically says, okay, well, she's going to do another piece that's the same size. So let's jump it down to the next piece. But you can see that my design, I only have one. So this is awesome if you're working with schools. Like let's say you have, a team and you need to do a bunch of little logos for helmets or keychains or something like that. Then we can go ahead, size it down to what we want, and let's say I want 5 rows, 3 columns, and look at that. We have this all set up. I only have one right there, and I can cut them all and be done. I can do stuff for a team really quickly. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions on that? Do any of you drink LaCroix? I am part of the millennial generation. I love it. Cool. Well, no one said yes or no to that, so I'm just going to assume that you understood what I was saying. What's funny, I asked if you guys like LaCroix, and I got a what is it, and no, and yuck no. Yeah, it's clear. It's a soda water. It's fizzy water. I like it. I like carbonated drinks, but I'm trying to not drink soda as much. So that's kind of my compromise. Yeah. But we'll move on. If I don't want the webinar to turn into LaCroix. All right, so you guys got the copy, the rows and columns. So let's go ahead and just do 1 row, 1 column, meaning I have 1 design on here. Okay. So let's go back to 1. And now over here we have nesting. So I'm going to turn off media layout, split screen, and show you a bunch of different stuff in here real quick. So how many of you have done nesting before in maybe Designer Edition or something else? So let's go over here. Let's do tests. Let's go over here and do Lisa. And let's go over here and do custom team name. Yay. Okay, so let's go right here. Let's resize this one. Let's make Lisa a little bit bigger. And then let's go over here and do our circle. Okay, so nesting is basically a way to rearrange the objects that you're cutting to use up the least amount of space. So that helps you because it preserves your material and it makes it a lot easier to save your material, okay? So now, with Designer Edition, there is a nesting feature. It's just not as advanced. So I'm going to take all these items. I'm going to show you the basic nesting feature, and I'm going to show you the one that is in Business Edition and things in it that make it a little bit easier. So let's select all my items, and then here is my basic nesting. It looks like 2 puzzle pieces, okay? So let's go over, and I'm going to make my cut area smaller. So let's say I'm using a 12 by 6 inch piece of vinyl. Okay, actually let's do 8. All right, so here's my 12 by 8 inch piece of vinyl. You can see that this red box around here is my safe cut area. So that is what we'll cut, unless I'm using my cutting mat, of course. Let's go over here and turn on my Cameo cutting mat. You can see that red line is extended a little bit further. That's just because the rollers don't need to hold on to my media anymore. Okay, so let's go over here. Let's turn on our nesting. Let's go ahead, use cut area. Do we want to align them? So align basically just keeps them lined up. We don't need that. Padding, I do a little bit of padding in between it, just give space. And then rotations, so this means it'll rotate it up to 2 times to kind of find a good way to fit it. I'll do 16. You only live once, right? So let's go ahead, select all this, and hit nest. Okay, so this may take a second. So check this out. So it doesn't take up a lot of space, as we see. However, look at our letters. Okay, now this is inconvenient because my names are broken up. My test is broken up. So what they've done is they're like, okay, yeah, we won't take up a whole lot of space. Wow, super great. But here's some issues with that. It broke up my text. So let me hit Control Z. Now with something like this, you can convert your text over to a compound path. So here's my text here. I can right click and make compound path, which means that I've flattened it into one big object. All these lines together make one big object. So that means it can't be separated. So if I were to go again and nest it, you can see the Lisa is together, but look at all those letters inside. 1 second, guys. People are talking in the hallway and it's super distracting. 1 second. Sorry, guys. I don't normally have this many distractions. Did you guys hear Gabe, by the way? When I was like, I tried to be gentle, but I said, can you go and shut a door? So can you go somewhere and shut the door? And so Gabe just yelled louder. All right, so here's the nesting part. So with nesting, I am a big proponent of doing that because it helps maximize my use of scrap vinyl. I don't like having a whole lot of waste, so I love doing that. So the great thing about Business Edition is that it has advanced nesting that makes this setup a lot easier. So let's go over it, open our media layout one more time, or split screen. So let's turn on that split screen, and then check this out. So right now, these are different colors. This basically means that my TRW Brewing at some point I cut on tool 2. So let's go to my Sun panel, and I'm going to do all of that on tool 1. So see how that changed to red? So at one point in time, I used tool 2, and I had it set to this. I had it set to cut on here. See how my lines are blue? I'm going to go over and turn it back on tool 1 over here. Do you guys get what I'm doing right now? This is not necessarily Business Edition, but a lot of people don't know this. Does that make sense with tool 1 and tool 2? Of course, Laura and Jonita both say yes. You guys always know. So with the Cameo 3, there are 2 carriers. You have your auto blade, which is in tool 1, and then you have your tool 2. You can put whatever blade you want in there. Realistically, you can put any blade you want in tool 1 as well. So something like that. At one point in time, the auto blade, when the Cameo first came out, didn't communicate super great, and so my cuts would still mess up. So I would go over and I would just use my premium blade in tool 2. So at that point, I cut it on tool 2. But now my auto blade's really great, so I go right here and I do it to cut. So let's go back to design so I can show you the advanced testing. All right. So here is my design, and then right here is my media layout view. So this is basically my cut panel that we're used to already. So we have this set over here. So let's go over to nesting, and let's turn on nesting. So check it out. It's not super great right now. It is, but it's not. So they're like, okay, you want advanced nesting? I'm gonna nest this as close as I can, okay? So this is what just happened. So we're just gonna adjust a couple settings and it's totally fine. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn my rotations up to 16. Now it's even closer. Padding, let's go ahead and add more padding. So I'm gonna do 8. This is just to make it easier to cut so you can see there's space between there. Interlock, it just will make it a lot closer. So you can see it goes right into a lot of these different parts. I'm going to turn that off. Maintain grain. So this one is awesome. I'm going to go to it after I do one more thing. So align, we can line it up or we can leave it. Honestly, I don't think align makes that much of a difference, so I just keep it turned on, whatever. Whole words. This is the part that's really awesome. So if you type out a word, so let's say you're cutting something and you're doing something for a team, okay? And so you're typing out Nick, Lisa, Lacey, all these different things, but you need to go back after your cut and change the name in there, so you're leaving it as text. That becomes an issue with the nesting because it's going to break apart your text. Right here we can go to whole words, and it keeps my words together. So check it out: test, custom, team, all that sort of thing. So it's all set up like that. So that's awesome because we don't have to convert our text over. We can keep it as text and retype it, okay? So that's one thing that's helpful. And let's say I want a little bit more padding, so let's go ahead and do 12. Give me a little bit more space going on there. And then the other thing that I really like is this maintain grain. So let's say we are cutting on pattern vinyl or pattern paper. So let's say you're cutting on the Caesar Easy Patterns chevron. So the pattern goes left to right, okay? So if it rotates it at an angle, well then you're gonna have the angle really weird on our vinyl with our cut. So maintain grain basically says when it nests, it's gonna keep it either this way or it'll flip it. Like it'll keep it this way or it'll flip it all the way this way so that the grain can stay the same way on there. So let's go ahead and do maintain grain. So now you can see it either flipped it all the way over or it kept it the same way, just nested it in there. All right. When it's like that after it cuts and you weed, well, with this method you have to piece your design back together. Yes. So yes and no. For nesting, a lot of times if I need a bunch of stuff on the same color and my design doesn't have to be together, I will use that. Now if there are parts of your design that have to stay together, so let's say, let's go over here and I'm going to stretch this out. And we want, I don't know, this Lisa and this square are always together. So let's say we have like a team and a name underneath it. What you can do is you can go over here and group this together. It's grouped together. And then right here, see this option right here, maintain groups. So no matter what, this Lisa is going to have this box on top. This group is always going to stay together because we have maintain groups turned on. Now I can uncheck it and it'll take it away. So you can see right here, my Lisa, that box is not there. But we can go right here and do maintain groups and set that up like that. Why are some cut lines not as dark, like the N in Lisa is darker than the Lisa? Honestly, Lisa, I don't know. I've noticed that sometimes with my cuts that the lines are darker. At first I thought it was maybe because I had two items stacked on top of each other and that was the issue. But I just typed it out. There's no way there are two stacked on top. I think it's just some sort of weird glitch or fluke with it that it shows some parts of it darker. They all cut the same. They're not multiple items. They just, I don't know, for some reason show up darker. It's kind of weird, but there's no real reason. So do you guys have any more questions on the nesting part of it? Does that make sense? Do you have any questions on this panel right here? So let me go over and I'm going to show you one more thing. I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing any features. The features are definitely more helpful with time saving. Now the work tools are part of Designer Edition, so that's on a Business Edition upgrade. The one thing that I want to show you here is I don't have multiple Cameos hooked up to my machine right now, but the cool thing is that you can set up multiple cuts on here. So with something like this, if you're doing a bunch of stuff and you have to run multiple machines at once, with Silhouette Studio Business Edition, you can't have multiple machines. So if I were to plug in another one, right here where you see Cameo 3, you'll see another machine plugged in there. And we can rename them. So I can click on Cameo and do Sparkle Cameo, because that's what I have right there. Or you can even label them Cameo 1, Cameo 2, Cameo 3, and plug them in. So with something like that, you would adjust your settings. So we're going to cut the Snap DC, we're going to set this all up, and then we would go over, select the Cameo, and it would say send. Now once we have that one done, we can set up our design again. You can even get another item, so go to this one, set it up, go to your send panel, and it will show this Cameo cutting, and then it'll show your next one down there ready, and you would just send to that one. Does that make sense? Good. And so do you guys have any more questions? Oh, I have one more thing. I always forget this one. Weed lines, okay? So this, actually, let me go ahead and I'm just gonna show you something that I'm going to be doing in a video later, okay? So I'm making a wall decal for my kitchen. Right here, it says we have this hope as an anchor, firm and secure. Cool, good deal. So right here, this is my final one, and this is actually already made into a compound path. So I don't really want that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this design and let's see. Okay, so this is still text, which is good. So let's go over and let's resize this. So let's go right here. Resize this super big. I'm going to make this, you know, let's go ahead and group it real quick to resize it. So this is stuff, you know, just whatever. Like just ignore me. Okay, so let's say we're doing a super huge design. So this is about 9 feet long, okay? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ungroup this, and I want to weld this text real quick. So right here, I have a script font. I'm just gonna weld it. But check this out. When we weld, because these items were not overlapping, they didn't actually join into one object. So I have several different objects in here. You guys see that? So I'm gonna go ahead and group it together, Control G, turn it, and I'm gonna set it up like I'm going to cut, okay? So let's go ahead, go to my page panel, and I am going to turn off my Cameo and then set my height to like 120 inches because this is gonna be a really big cut, okay? At least in our anchors. I know, Rochelle, I love my anchors. All right, so let's set this up in the middle because I want to be safe with my cut. And so this is gonna be a video I do on cutting a large decal, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over right here, we have weed settings. So this is probably one of the most undervalued and useful features of Silhouette Studio Business Edition. So weed lines, we're gonna go ahead and you have horizontal. So basically it finds areas horizontally where it can pull up a weed line and weed off, and basically you don't have to pull up huge sections of your design. And then we can go over, we can do horizontal and vertical. So you can see it'll make different lines in there. Right here it just does this. And then we can also do recursive, which this is gonna find weed lines all over the place that we can weed that up. So you can see with this part here, it really helps. Something like this, I'm not exactly sure why it's doing that. Let me go ahead and ungroup that, see if that helps. Okay, check it out. So now we can ungroup it. So when I go to cut this, it's gonna cut a little box around each one of these sections here so that I'm basically not pulling up 8 feet of decal vinyl, because guys, I can almost guarantee you if I were to do that, my vinyl would fold over on itself and I would have ruined the whole decal, okay? So if you're doing any sort of large cut or really any sort of intricate cut, the weed settings is a super useful tool of Business Edition because it helps set it up. And the way it works is it finds breaks in your design that it can do a cut line in there. So a couple weeks ago I was helping a customer and her weed lines were not working, okay? You know, they were saying it's not making weed lines through my design. However, keep in mind that weed lines have to be able to go towards to the edge of the design or out of the design. So if you have a design, like let's say it's a circle or a semicircle and there's text inside of there, so a lot of the text on the inside is not going to have a weed box made around it because there's no way for that weed line to go to the edge of your material. Does that make sense, you guys? So just keep that in mind. If you have something detailed inside of another shape, the weed lines will probably not get to that. You want to have something where it can do a clean cut across the whole thing. Now, and I emphasize to you guys, if you ever do a big cut, if you ever do like more than like a foot and a half, see if you can get weed lines to work, because I promise you, like, this is the biggest mistake I always make. I am like when I do big cuts, I am so intent on making sure my vinyl feeds correctly, it goes straight, I can do the big cut, and I always forget in my design, I need to do weed lines, because then I peel it up and my vinyl will fold over. And once I had a cut that was 4 feet long, fairly detailed, I forgot to do weed lines. I started peeling it up, and of course I was overwhelmed because I had like 3 feet of vinyl going on here. I didn't get a chance to cut it. The vinyl fell over, oops, sorry, that was a loud clap, touched the other vinyl, and it ruined the whole thing. I had to recut it. So that's one thing that I love. I love. Dora, sometimes when I have words off the map or the cut area, I get weed lines on those words also. That's a super easy fix. Basically, it's looking for everything in your workspace. What you have to do is just check this only shapes and media option and it'll stop it. So let me go over and do some stuff outside of here, okay? So if I were to turn it off, then it's doing weed lines around everything, because it's like, oh, For some reason, it doesn't care that it's like way bigger than the mat and it's not going to cut anyway, but they're like, I'm going to make these weed lines for those shapes out here. So we can just do this little check right here, only shapes on media, and then you're all set to go.